So we talk about this idea of the tithe. And we talk about the tithe first being an act of submission, saying, God, I put you first. I prioritize you. But we also talk about the tithe being an act of trust, saying, God, I depend on you. And I want to use an illustration to help you kind of understand what does this look like in our everyday lives. And so I've got 10 $10 bills here, which if you're a math genius, that's $100, right? And I just want you to pretend for a moment that this is your payment for the month. Now, for most of us, we recognize you're not buying a whole lot for $100 these days. But let's just pretend this is what you make within a month, in an average month. What does it look like for most people in an average month? Well, you get paid, and the first thing you got to do is what? Give the government their amount, right? Before you're done with it, 30% of your money is already gone, you know? And then you go from that, and you're like, well, I got to live somewhere. So I got a mortgage or I got to pay rent. And so for a lot of people, another 20% goes there. And so 50% of your money's already taken care of before you've done anything else. But then you still gotta live, right? You gotta pay bills. And so you gotta pay your electric, and you gotta pay your gas bill, and you gotta pay for a phone, right? You got a phone, whatever. And at that point, you still haven't eaten anything. You're like, so I gotta pay for food, right? And if you got kids, you're like, they gotta eat, and I gotta give them 3 meals a day. And for a lot of people, when you get to the end of the month, there's just nothing left, right? And for some people, they might get to the end of the month and realize, I got a little left over. I got a little extra. And if you're really feeling generous, you might say, hey, I want to give a little something to the Lord in the offering. Now, that's great. I think it's an admirable thing to say, God, I want to give you that. But do you realize there is no act of trust in that action? There's no act of saying, God, I'm submitted to you in that action. No, it's saying, God, I'll give you what's left over. And so I want to give you a demonstration of what does the tithe actually look like? How does that look different than what I just explained? You see, when you get paid just like everybody else, you get paid, there's your $100. The first thing you do, you take the first 10%, you say, God, I trust you. I trust in you. My trust is not in myself. My trust is not in my money. My trust is not in my job. It's not in my boss. It's not in the government. It's not in the economy. God, my trust is in you. My hope is in you. You are my source. You're the one I'm depending on. You're the one I'm leaning on. You're the one I am trusting in. But it's not just an act of trust. It's an act of submission. Saying, God, I am not going to be controlled by this. I don't worship the dollar, so I give you first. I put you first in my life. I choose to worship you above everything else. I'm not going to be controlled by the things of this world. I'm not going to be controlled by stuff. I am not going to be controlled by this money. That's what the tithe looks like. It says, God, I trust you. God, I submit myself to you. And when you live that way, everything else changes in your life.